Welcome to our May Covenant talk. This talk is about Father's daring action, as a letter of recommendation for us. So far this year, our reflections for Covenant Sundays have been focusing on letters of recommendation. And while looking at some personalities in our Schoenstatt history, we would also like to look at some of our Schoenstatt milestones and how they can be considered as letters of recommendation from God for us. Today, I will look briefly at the third milestone of Schoenstatt history, the 31st of May, 1949. On this day, Father Kentenich placed on the altar in the shrine in Bella Vista, Chile, a long letter to the bishops of Germany known as the Pistola Prolonga. It was his answer to the report about the bishop's visitation of Schoenstatt, which confirmed the theological correctness of Schoenstatt spirituality, but questioned some of its educational practices. Father Kentenich was concerned that the church had been travelling along at a rapid rate towards leaving God out of all things to which he belongs, and he wished to explain the educational approach he was taking to help rectify this problem. Father used the term mechanistic thinking and spoke of a wall which was preventing the church from viewing God's connection with all things he has created. It seems that as man takes more and more control of his own destiny, what Father calls the wall, this separation of things which belong together gets higher and higher. It was to take 45 more years before a pope, as in John Paul II writes. It will be fitting, and I might just pick this up to read it. It will be fitting to broach the vast subject of the crisis of civilization, which has become especially apparent in the West, which is highly developed from the standpoint of technology, but it is interiorly impoverished by its tendency to forget God or to keep him at a distance. This crisis of civilization must be countered by the civilization of love, founded on the universal values of peace, solidarity, justice, and liberty, which find their full attainment in Christ. Countered by a civilization of love, Father saw Mary's covenant of love as the only true way that a civilization of love could counter the mechanistic curse. When looking at the date of the third milestone, however, of Schoenstatt history in 1949, it strikes one in itself as a nondescript, unrelatable date, unlike the 20th of January 1914, which most people of my age can conjure up some knowledge about because of images of war or the horror of concentration camps seen on television and spoken about by parents and grandparents. Now, interestingly, gathering some facts about 1949, I found planes had been invented early in this century, but motorbikes, particularly the Harley-Davidson WLC, produced during World War II, actually spawned a post-war biker culture. Similarly, the well-known Volkswagen Beetle, commissioned by Adolf Hitler in World War II, still remains the best-selling car of all time. TV was about to become available to the masses, as was portable transistor radio sets. Naval sextants became the method for navigating poorly charted seas. The polio epidemic was coming to its height, and the iron lung was born. Mao Zedong's victory in a civil war in China caused China to join the communist bloc. A new consumerism was on the horizon in the form of electric-powered devices to bring relief from domestic drudgery. And the bikini was on the horizon of being controversial. 50,000 people had been killed in the use of a second atomic bomb in Nagasaki, Japan. Harry Truman became America's president, and Australian citizenship was introduced in 1949. On the 13th of October of this year, my husband was born. The World Council of Churches organized in 1948. In 1949, when Father writes his Epistola Longa, what a mouthful. The book, the 31st of May, was written to help us think about, oh no, I'm on page 3 there, the joys of doing a talk. We're placing this long epistle in the vein of prophets of old, we could say, and places it on the altar of the Chilean shrine. The Los Angeles Crusade catapults Billy Graham into the forefront. The church in Rome was planning the dogma of the Assumption of Mary in 1950, and Mother Teresa founded the Missionaries of Charity. The words of John Paul quoted earlier highlight the meaning behind Father's response 45 years before to the German bishop. He saw that the German church was moving in the wrong direction, contributing to the mechanization problem, and he foresaw in many ways the possibility, his Father speaking here, not the Pope, he foresaw in many ways the possibility that it was the daughter shrines of the South American countries who would have to carry the burden of making Mary's mission of organic covenantal love known and carried forward. Father saw the need for instruments who are willing to help the Blessed Mother in her task of not only countering the mechanization curse, but doing it with love. Applying Schoenstatt terminology to a civilization of love, we need to learn the language and application of what Father terms organic thinking, loving, and living. Try to think yourselves at this point whether your own motivations in life are based on a principle of love of fellow man, woman, based on the love of God, Mary, and Jesus in your own lives. Are you able to see God in the everyday things of life, in our moral stances and judgment, etc., because of the covenant you have made with Mary? If you can say yes to this, you have some sort of understanding of what organic thinking, loving, and living is about. Another quote, organic thinking is a thinking which sees things in their God-willed context, and while at times analytical, does not lose sight that the parts analysed need to be kept in the perspective of their greater organic whole. I'm going to take a break at the moment. The other day, my granddaughter was playing with these two magnets. What happens when you put them back together? And that's what organic is thinking about, keeping two parts like that in sync with each other, naturally pulled back together. By contrast, mechanistic thinking is the thinking which mechanically and arbitrarily separates things that belongs together. Classic example of mechanistic thinking is the separation of Christ from Mary, or the liturgical life of the church from Marian devotion. I found an interesting brief comparison of linear thinkers and organic thinkers. Now, linear does not explain mechanistic, but it is at least a way of starting a line of thinking that you understand something opposite to organic thinking of our time. And it gives a little indication of the difference between mechanistic thinking and organic thinking, but as I said, it does not fully explain it. So, linear thinkers send in the Marines. Organic thinkers send in the diplomats. Linear thinkers build prisons and increase police forces. Organic thinkers set up educational and diversion programs. Linear thinkers want one nation, theirs, to be supreme. Organic thinkers value a community of nations working together to solve the world's problems. Linear thinkers like clearly defined roles. Organic thinkers like extreme flexibility in their roles, and so on. I leave you to apply these and see where you fit in, especially as the comparison for both presently is 3/4 of the world leans towards linear thinking at the moment. So it's not hard to see how Father, who was ahead of the classifications and understanding we have now, was really concerned about a church that had been heading towards mechanistic thinking. There's no doubt in my mind that Father Kentenich was facing an uphill battle trying to bring in the organic concept of Mary being the official and permanent helpmate of Christ in the entire work of redemption. Yet, because of his work as prophet, being an image of the Father, an organic thinker extraordinaire, in my opinion, Mary was able to work with her instruments, to build many, many shrines around the world from where she could form in her covenant partners a deep love of God and Christ, creating thereby many civilizations of love and helping people to think, live, and love organically. The book, 31st of May, was written to help us think about how we can help create a civilization of love with the help of Mary's covenant from right where we are. And a good starting point for us is Father Niehauser's conclusion of chapter 7. It states, we can see that the crusade of organic thinking, loving and living will be won in the trenches of everyday life. We too may be beset by many traces of mechanistic or separatist thinking, but if we strive to bring things back together again and employ the graces available in the covenant of love with Mary, the great healing of ourselves and our society can begin. I would now like to speak as Father's voice and have you think about how you would answer him. The following points are taken from chapter 7 of the book, 31st of May. Father Kentenich asked this, how are you going with seeing the 20th of January and the 30th of 1st of May as leap of faith events? Are his actions, his faith and trust truly letters of recommendation for us? How are you going with understanding that the 20th of January was all about with Mary and the family for the Schoenstatt family, and the 31st of May was all about with Mary and the Schoenstatt family for the church? Father reflects. The contrast of mechanistic thinking and organic thinking laid out above is a brief example of what needs much expansion to fully understand. I am aware, however, that time is limited, so can only encourage you to study this important topic. Father suggests that we now briefly look at organic loving, which is rational and supernatural love seen in harmony, and an organic interconnection. It is what makes you have such an extraordinarily strong reaction against so much mediocrity in the world of today. If we hear again and again that the characteristic feature of man today is his lack of deep personal relationship, which in effect is his inability or weakened ability to really love, it's no surprise we feel that the world is on the brink of ending. We have spoken about a crusade of organic thinking and of organic loving. Now comes, of course, a crusade of organic living. What do I mean by that? This is Father speaking. Organic life, a crusade of organic living. Just be careful that your imagination does not get carried away and think up God only knows what kind of images of organic living. To use a term of ours from around the year 1914 and the first years after the war, we shouldn't be constantly living in a fantasy world. What do I mean by that? That we have God only knows what kind of radiant fantasies dream about our future life with God in incredible detail but our practical daily life remains completely anemic. Organic living is the crusade of everyday sanctity. So it's me again. And in conclusion, I ask you in Father's words, do you get the connection? Everyday sanctity, not daydreams or big talk, or going to church on Sunday and then not manifesting your faith in everyday life? Are you doing your everyday duties extraordinarily well out of a total love for God? Are you balancing the natural, spiritual, and supernatural sides of being an individual and being in the community? Is suffering conquering you, or do you see it unanswered by prayer? Or do you see them linked as part of the creative activity of God, as a dialogue with God, and suffering a crucial part of salvation? And at that point, I am finished. But I have some questions for you, which hopefully will get you thinking along the lines of organic thinking and loving and living. So I'll read them for you and then you can discuss them. What leap of faith did Father Kentenich take on the 31st of May 1949? How can this be a point of recommendation for us? The 31st of May was all about with Mary and the Schoenstatt family for the church. How do you understand this? Why did Father Kentenich see that the crusade of organic living is the crusade of everyday sanctity? And finally, does everyday sanctity exist in my life as it did in Father's, as an organic connection with what I am doing at a particular moment, and as a spiritual connection that sees God's hand in that moment with me? Thank you for listening.